What's up, guys? Do3 from Team Synergy here, bringing you guys my updated Amazoness deck list. I know in the last video I said I perfected the deck and it was perfect, but believe it or not, I was able to make this deck even better. I really didn't change that much. I think I took out and added maybe like 5 new cards, as well as an OTK. I didn't realize there was an OTK with Amazonesses, and then I found it, and so I was like, oh lit, so I added it into the deck, and I'm going to show it to you guys, because there's not really that many videos of it on YouTube, but since I've already recorded this deck profile, I'm not going to go super in-depth with all the cards. I'll explain the new card choices and maybe give very, very basic explanations of what some of the cards do, but for the most part, I'm not going to go too in-depth, except for talking about the new cards that I added. But anyways, let's get right into the deck profile. Alright, so for the monster lineup, we're still playing 3 copies of Princess. This is pretty standard in any Amazonas deck. For those of you who don't know what she does, whenever she's normal or special summoned, you get to search one Amazonas spell or trap from your deck and add it to your hand, as well as whenever she declares an attack, you can discard 1 card from your hand or field, send it to the graveyard, and special summon 1 Amazonas monster from your deck. So most of the time, you're going to be using that to bring out your copies of Amazonas Queen. Then you run 3 copies of Swordswoman. She's a really good card. She's got lots of good interactions with like Amazonas Queen. When Amazonas Queen's on the field, your monsters can't be destroyed by battle, and with Swordswoman, your opponent takes all battle damage from battles involving this card instead of you. So what you do is you summon her with your queen on the field, and you just attack into your opponent's bigger monsters all day and just do damage to them. Then you run 3 copies of Amazonas Paladin. She's our main beat stick of the deck. You run 2 copies of Tiger. I don't like running Baby Tiger. I said that in the last deck profile. I think regular Tiger is just a lot better. There's really no point. So yeah, we run him. And then you run 2 copies of Amazonas Queen. We only run 2 copies of Empress in the extra deck, and because Amazonas Princess counts as a copy of Queen, we only really need to run 2 of her, although she is really good. If you ran 3, I couldn't blame you, but I think you really only need 2. Then we run 2 copies of Amazonas Sage. She's in here kind of just to fill up spots. I ran 2 Fighter before, but ended up taking her out. Between Fighter and Sage, I feel like Sage is the better one. Fighter's effect was that you don't take any damage with battles involving that card, but Sage lets you pop a back row if she attacks during the battle phase and survives to the end. And I think popping back row is better than no battle damage, so cut the 2 Fighter and ran 2 Sage. And one thing I changed is I went ahead and added another copy of King of the Swamp. One thing that was pretty obvious in the deck is that the main focus of the deck is to get into your fusion cards. And I felt 1 King of the Swamp was just one too little, so I went ahead and bumped this up to 1 because you do want to see your polymerizations as much as possible. And if you for some reason draw into 2, you can search for 2 polys with them, or you can always use 1 as a fusion material if you want. We're still running 1 copy of Masterpiece. I don't run the 2 copies of Willpower anymore, so there's only 5 targets for him as far as spells and traps go. But he's still really good, and as long as he's at 1, we're probably going to be running him in this deck. Next, we run 1 copy of our Win Condition. Grand Mole. For those of you who don't know what Grand Mole does, he's pretty much like Makira the Destroyer. He lets us play trap cards from our hand, and so it's really good for getting like Amazonas Onslaught onto the field as fast as possible. So Grand Mole is a must-have. He's so good. Next, moving on to the spells, we won 1 copy of Raigeki. Before I ran Darkhold, but I finally sucked it up and bought a Raigeki, so yeah, we're going to run Raigeki. And then Soul Charge. In the last deck profile, we ran Rhoda and we ran Rhoda and something. No, Terraforming. That's what we ran Rhoda and Terraforming. I went ahead and cut those 2 because Rhoda we don't really need. There's other cards that we need that are better than Rhoda, and Terraforming, it's just I feel like we didn't really need it. We have so many searches for our field spell anyways. Like I feel like Terraforming was just kind of unnecessary. Of course, we're still running our 3 copies of Polymerization. Pretty self-explanatory to go into our fusions. We run 1 copy of Black Garden. So Black Garden, actually, you need it for the OTK. In my deck, I only run 1 copy of it. I don't like to play around the OTK. Like, I don't like to play for it. But if you draw into Black Garden, the OTK is not very hard to pull off. And so if it comes up, then it comes up. If you want to play a pure OTK variant, then what I'd recommend doing is cutting your 3 copies of Amazonas Village, running just straight up 3 copies of Black Garden, and cutting out like your polys or something, and running your 3 copies of Terraforming, because you want to see Black Garden as fast as possible if you're just going to play for the OTK. Then, like I said, we run 3 copies of Village. Obviously, pretty standard in any Amazonas deck, really good. 3 copies of Call. This card's just a free search. You also need this card for the OTK, so we want to run 3 of it. 2 copies of Amazonas Fighting Spirit. This is the last card we need for the OTK. just really good card. Helps your smaller monsters become big and beat over problematic monsters your opponent has. So really good card either way. Then we run 2 copies of Twin Twisters. This is also new in the deck. I didn't run any kind of back row destruction before, but I kind of realized that it's actually pretty important. So I went ahead and we put 2 copies of Twin Twisters in here. Next, for the traps, this is where things are different again. I run 2 copies of Amazoness Archers. So I totally forgot about this card. It's a really old card. It's from Magician's Force. And basically what it does is you flip it during your opponent's main phase, and that turn, all their monsters lose 500 attack, and they have to attack with all their monsters in the battle phase. So the reason why this card is really, really good is if you have like Ambush on the field. For those of you who don't know what Ambush does, whenever your opponent battles an Amazoness monster, after damage calculation, their monster's banished, right? And so if you have Ambush on the field and your opponent doesn't have anything to deal with it, a lot of the time what they do is they just won't attack you because they don't want their monsters to get banished. So what you do is you flip this, and then your opponent has to attack you with all the monsters they control. And because they lose 500, most of the time they're going to end up being smaller than what you have on the field anyways. And it's pretty much just a free way to banish all of your opponent's monsters. And it's really hard to recover after that. So really, really, really good card to have it too. Next, we play 3 copies of Ambush. This is extremely standard in any Amazoness deck. You never want to run less than 3 of this card. It is ridiculously good. And then, of course, we run the 2 copies of Quaking Mirror Force. You can run something else if you want. You can run the Solemn Brigade. I like Quaking. Quaking's really good. A lot of boss monsters in today's meta can't be destroyed by battle or card effects. And so I think Quaking's really good because you can just turn your opponent's entire field upside down and face down defense position. That way they're not destroyed. So there's not really a lot of cards that can, really negate this, especially, boss monsters or whatever. So I think Quaking's the best choice. But anyways, that's going to do it for the main deck. Let's go ahead and get into the extra deck. Alright, so for the extra deck's pretty much the same. I didn't really change too much here. So, of course, you're running your 2 copies of Empress. She's your best fusion. You want to make her as often as possible. She's probably what the deck does best, honestly, is making Empress and swarming the field with rank 4 monsters and stuff. So, you got to run 2. If you want to run 3, you totally can. We do run 2 copies of Liger, but if you want to cut 1 Liger, or even both, and just play an extra copy of Empress, you really wouldn't be in the wrong. I couldn't blame you because Empress is really good. Liger, I just like to have him as just kind of a play in the deck. Plus, you never really go into more than 2 Empress anyways. I never really find myself needing more than the 2, so that's what I like to do. And then we run the 2 copies of Mrs. Radiant. Mrs. Radiant's probably the best Link monster in the extra deck. She increases the attack of all your Earth monsters by 500. She's really easy to go into. Like I said, one of the things this deck does best is swarm the field, and so she's really easy to get into. Next, you run 1 Isolde. Isolde is a new one I put in here. She's really good. Whenever you summon her, you can add 1 warrior from your deck to your hand. So most of the time, you're going to be grabbing Princess if you don't have her. Especially if you want to pull off the OTK, because you do need Princess for the OTK. This is another card you could run 2 of if you want. I only run 1, but you could totally run 2 if you want. Next, I run 1 Decode Talker. You don't really go into Decode Talker. What I would recommend for this deck is you don't really want to run any Link monsters that are Link 3 or higher. Reason being is, at that point, I think you're just kind of negging yourself. This deck doesn't have a whole lot of graveyard recovery, and so it's really kind of unnecessary to link in anything higher. You can run Saryuja, you can run Firewall, Borreload, whatever you want, but I really wouldn't recommend it. I'd recommend, really just sticking to your 2s, like your Mrs. Radiance and your Isolde. If you want, you could add a 3rd copy of Mrs. Radiant. That would totally be fine, and an extra copy of Isolde. I just have Decode in here, just to have him in here. You have a lot of extra deck space in this deck, too. This lineup right here is what I would say is mandatory. Everything else, including Decode, is pretty much just bonus. And then, after that, of course, you're probably going to want to run some rank 4 Exceeds, and I think the best ones you could run is like Tornado Dragon, Dark Rebellion for beating over stuff, Honor Arc for taking stuff, and like Castel. Anything else is completely up to preference. This is just what I would recommend. Like I said, you have tons of room in this extra deck. The only things that are mandatory are at least Empress, Radiant, and Isolde. Everything else is entirely up to you and what you want to play. Anyways, I'm going to go ahead and show you guys the OTK combo now. So let's get right into it. So these are the 4 cards you need for the OTK. You need 1 Amazoness Princess, your Black Garden, Amazoness Fighting Spirit, and Amazoness Call. So the kind of hand you're looking for here is 1 Call, your Black Garden, and either Princess or Amazoning Fighting Spirit. You're going to use your Call to search for whichever one you don't have. So this is how the OTK goes, right? So you want to play your Black Garden, right? So that's on the field. You want to use your call to search for whichever one you don't have. Let's say you search for Fighting Spirit. So call goes to the graveyard, you search for your Fighting Spirit. You want to play that, and then summon your princess. From here, you want to use call's effect from the graveyard, banish it, and target your princess so that now she can attack all your opponent's monsters once. So then you can go into the battle phase, and you attack. And then what you would use is princess's effect to ditch a card from your hand, send it to the graveyard, and special summon a monster from your deck to your field. And when you do that, your opponent gets a token on their side of the field. So then what you do is use princess and you attack the opponent's token. I think the tokens have 800 attack, and princess is going to have like 600 because her attack's going to be halved, and then she gains 1,000. So you're doing 800 damage to your opponent whenever you attack a token. When you attack the token, you're going to use her effect again to ditch something. Or you're going to ditch the monster that you special summon from her effect to special summon another monster, and then your opponent gets another token. And then it turns into this loop where you just keep attacking your opponent's tokens and keep using her effect to keep summoning stuff on your field. So they just keep getting tokens, and you just keep attacking them over and over and over again. And every time you want to ditch the monster you're using to summon her, so you'll always have something to get rid of to keep giving your opponent tokens. So that's how the OTK works. It's really simple, and it's actually really easy to pull off. Like I said, in the main deck, if you want to run a deck profile specifically built around just the OTK, you want to run 3 copies of Black Garden and 3 Terraforming, because you want to see this card as much as possible. And then the Call, the Fighting Spirit, and the Princess are all pretty easy to get in your hand. But yeah, that's the OTK. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching my Amazoness deck profile. I firmly believe that this is as good as an Amazoness deck's going to get without adding in like Brilliant Diffusion or Invoked or anything crazy like that. I spent a lot of time on this. It's a really, really good deck. I like it a lot. It can OTK, and it's a lot of fun to use. Plus, we got Grand Mole, so you already know it's really good. Last time I set a like goal was on my Toon deck profile, so it's been a hot minute. And I asked for a really modest 1 million likes, and y'all totally killed it. And I think we're currently sitting at like 7 likes on that video or something like that. So I know y'all. I believe in y'all. Let's see if we can smash out 10 million likes on this video. All right, that's one person for every email I got asking for this deck profile, and I know y'all can do it. We're gonna kill it. Let's set a week goal on that too. See if y'all can do 10 million likes in a week. That's pretty obtainable. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching again, and I'll see you guys in the next deck profile.